So here we see the left thoracic duct coming up from the chyle system, coming through the diaphragm, the left thoracic duct. And we notice here that it's actually draining back into the junction between the left internal jugular vein here and the left subclavian vein there. So it's draining back into the circulatory system just here. And other lymph trunks are joining the left thoracic duct from the arms and from the left-hand side of the head. Now, the trunks that drain the right side of the body, the right thorax, from the right side of the head, from the right arm, drain into the right lymphatic duct. But this is short. So the left lymphatic duct is long. It goes all the way from the chyle system all the way up to the subclavian vein. But this is actually a very short duct. The right lymphatic duct is short. So the lymphatic trunks are joining directly. But the right lymphatic duct is also draining into the junction between the internal jugular vein, this one of course being the right internal jugular vein, and the right subclavian vein, completing the circulation of the lymph as the lymphatic fluid flows back into the venous circulation. From both of these veins, of course, the blood is going to flow back into the superior vena cava, which drains back directly into the right atrium of the heart. So we've looked at the anatomical nature of the lymphatic vessels draining the lymphatic fluid from all parts of the body. Very extensive network, but all draining into the right and the left lymphatic ducts. Now, as a student, I knew about the systemic drainage of the lymphatic fluid, but it didn't occur to me that the lungs also have a very extensive lymphatic network. Because if we get fluid building up in the lungs, that means the patient can't breathe properly. What do we call it if fluid builds up in the lungs? Well, obviously that's pulmonary edema. And significant pulmonary edema is a life-threatening condition. So the lungs need extensive lymphatic drainage to prevent the development of pulmonary edema. And that's what I want to look at in this next diagram. So this diagram hopefully will help us understand the relationship between the systemic and pulmonary blood systems and the systemic and pulmonary lymphatic systems. So let's start off here in the left ventricle, and we're going to draw the blood in here bright red because it's oxygenated. Then from there the blood's going to be pumped into the aorta and into the systemic arterial system. And when the blood arrives in the capillaries of the body, it's going to be well oxygenated. But as it goes through the tissues of the body, the oxygen is going to be progressively given up till the blood leaving via the veins, the systemic veins, is going to be relatively deoxygenated. Then this relatively deoxygenated blood is going to drain back via the systemic veins into the inferior and superior vena cava and into the right atrium. It's going to go through to the right ventricle and then be pumped out into the pulmonary artery and into the pulmonary arterial system. When this blood arrives in the lungs, it's going to be relatively deoxygenated, but then as it goes through the lungs, it's going to gradually pick up oxygen. The hemoglobin will be oxygenated. And then the blood draining back via the pulmonary veins is going to be well oxygenated, bright red blood. And that's going to drain back into the left atrium, completing the circulatory system. Now, tissue fluid will form from the systemic capillaries, and that tissue fluid will go into the interstitial spaces, Most of it will be reabsorbed into the systemic capillaries. That which is not reabsorbed into the systemic capillaries will be absorbed into the systemic lymphatic capillaries. Once the tissue fluid goes into a lymphatic vessel, it becomes lymphatic fluid. So here we have the systemic lymphatic capillaries collecting lymphatic fluid, and this will first of all drain in afferent lymphatic vessels into a systemic lymph node. The lymphatic fluid will then percolate through this lymph node, being drained in efferent lymph nodes, being drained into efferent lymphatic vessels. It goes through the lymph node into an efferent lymphatic vessel, and these efferent lymphatic vessels form progressively larger lymphatic vessels, as we've seen, until eventually it's drained back into the venous blood. And tissue fluid is also formed by the pulmonary capillaries. That's going to be absorbed into the pulmonary lymphatic capillaries. And again, that's going to drain via afferent pulmonary lymphatic vessels into pulmonary lymph nodes. That's going to drain into efferent pulmonary vessels, and these will eventually drain back also into the venous blood supply, completing the circulatory system. So we see that there is a system of systemic lymphatics, and we see that there is a system of pulmonary lymphatics. The pulmonary lymphatics are very extensive to prevent any development of pulmonary edema, which could compromise respiratory function. What we want to do now is think about the way that the lymphatic system relates to whole body anatomy. How is it draining? What sort of channels and ducts is it draining through? And how does it get back into the bloodstream? Well, let's start off by identifying the subclavian veins, because we know that's where the lymphatic fluid eventually ends up. So we have the left subclavian vein on this side, and the right subclavian vein on this side. And here I've already sketched in the rough position of the diaphragm. And the way I think about it, the other key component, well perhaps the key component of the lymphatic system in terms of the drainage, is this chyle system, sometimes called the cisterna chyli. And that's a dilated lymphatic chamber, and it's located in the middle, round about the level of the first lumbar vertebrae, round about L1. So we could draw that in about there. It's a dilated chamber. Now, we've said that the lymphatic system is very extensive. So it's as extensive as the blood system, very extensive network. So each toe is going to have an extensive lymphatic array of lymphatic vessels, and these are going to drain up larger vessels in the leg, interlinking network of lymphatic vessels, carrying the lymphatic fluid up towards the centre of the body. It's aided by muscular contraction, it's aided by pulsation of adjacent arteries, and of course the walls of the lymphatic vessels are also contractile. And these are going to drain through areas of lymph nodes as we've looked at before. And it's going to be the same in the other leg. There's going to be an extensive network of lymphatic vessels draining the leg. Again, going through lymph nodes. Now, there's also the drainage of the lymphatic fluid from the small intestine, which you might remember contains the chylomicrons, the fatty material absorbed from the lacteals. So there's going to be an extensive network of lymphatic vessels from them. And also the other parts of the abdomen are going to be draining all going towards this chyle cistern here. And likewise lymphatic vessels from the legs. And eventually what happens is all of these vessels come together and there's 4 large lymphatic trunks drain into the chyle cistern here. So large lymphatic trunks bringing the lymphatic fluid into this central chyle cistern or cisterna chyli. Now it's interesting to note that the lymphatic fluid coming from the legs is going to be clear. The lymphatic fluid coming from the tissues of the abdomen is going to be clear. But of course the lymphatic fluid draining the lacteals of the small intestine is going to be milky and cloudy because it contains the fatty chylomicrons. So I guess that's why this is called the chyle cistern. It's where the chyle drains into, but also all the other lymphatic fluid drains into that as well. Now, from the chyle cistern, there's a large lymphatic duct drains up through the thoracic cavity. And this is called the left thoracic duct, a wider duct. And as this goes up, some lymphatic vessels join, shortish ones join from the right part of the thorax, longer ones join from the left side of the thorax. And this actually comes round to go back into the left subclavian vein. But before it does that, of course, there's a very extensive lymphatic network in the arms. Very extensive. As indeed there is in the legs. So lymphatic vessels travel up through the arms, draining through the axillary lymph nodes in the armpit. And then these go on and join onto the thoracic duct as well. And also the left side of the head has got extensive lymphatic drainage. So from the left side of the head and the neck, left side of the neck, again forming larger vessels which collect into the left thoracic duct, and then all this goes back in to the left subclavian vein. In other words, the lymphatic fluid from both legs, the abdomen, the left arm, the left side of the head and the left side of the neck are all draining back into the left subclavian vein. But of course there's lymphatic drainage on the right hand side of the body as well. And again, the thumb, all the fingers will have extensive lymphatic vessels draining the lymphatic fluid away from the right hand, going up the right arm. Here we have the axillary lymph nodes. And again, these all come together in larger vessels. And also draining the right side of the thoracic cavity. There's lymphatic drainage vessels draining the right side of the thorax. And draining the right side of the head. And the right side of the neck. And all of these from the right arm, the right side of the thorax, the right side of the head, the right side of the neck, all come together into the right thoracic duct. But that's a very short duct. So the left duct was very long because it goes all the way up through the thorax from the abdomen. But the right thoracic duct, going into the right subclavian vein is relatively short. So that will drain lymphatic fluid from these parts of the body into the right subclavian vein. So what this means is that both legs the abdomen, the left arm, the left side of the thoracic cavity, the left side of the neck and head are all draining into the left subclavian vein. So all of this part of the body here draining into one common vein. That of course leaves the right side of the head, the right side of the neck, the right arm and part of the right thoracic cavity. All these areas of the body are draining into the right thoracic duct to drain into the right subclavian vein. So that gives us a whole body overview of the return of the lymphatic fluid from the capillaries in the tissues where it originally absorbs from the interstitial fluid, all the way back into the left and the right subclavian vein.